The pureblood movement is growing. Couple this with the medical freedom movement, which is now embracing the purebloods. This is leading to ever more legislation designed to curb power of doctors and the government from dictating when or if your rights to bodily autonomy are allowed. That is the subject of today's episode. And so from Trial Site News, I am Adrian, and our episode is starting right now. So, over the past several months, we've covered on this channel a growing movement that has sprung up, a so-called pureblood group. This is made up of folks who are proudly COVID-19 vaccine hesitant, and not only announce that status, but embrace it as a badge of honor, evidencing the belief that the current products are not safe and effective. Of course, naturally, the official consensus of regulators, research institutes, national public health agencies, and organized medicine itself push the narrative that the COVID-19 vaccines are, in fact, safe and effective. However, side effects and vaccine injuries do exist, and in fact, these very same agencies acknowledge that they exist and happen. Although outfits like the WHO will say that they are rare and that the benefits of the vaccine far outweigh the risk. But even if the side effects are rare, considering the magnitude of COVID-19 vaccine response, 220 million fully vaccinated in the US alone, this means that even rare side effects will still translate into a lot of injuries relative to other vaccine programs. And so here we are. Despite the best attempts to silence conversation about this from news and social media outlets, the debate regarding the COVID-19 vaccinations has sparked a new movement which is pushing for the right to choose blood transfusions from non-vaccinated donors. This so-called pureblood movement centers around the roughly 19% of Americans who have not yet received a single dose of the COVID vaccine. These men and women who have not yet been vaccinated cite safety concerns that they will potentially receive vaccine material from blood transfusion if the donor has been vaccinated. This can all be traced back to post-2020, where following the release of the mRNA vaccines and the pressure placed on average citizens to get vaccinated or else, this fueled a growing distrust in government and medical agencies, and because of this, concerns over blood transfusions have increased over fears of the perceived contagion risk. And now this movement is attracting interest from the medical community itself as it raises concerns about the possibility that the vaccines might contaminate the body. The medical freedom movement, which has debated topics from abortion to ivermectin to gender assignment, is now engaging with the issue of blood donation and aims to ensure that a patient's right to a designated donor is preserved. Since the start of the pandemic, the number of unvaccinated individuals at large has been growing, and the recent medical freedom movement is attracting many individuals calling for legislation that prohibits hospitals or doctors from infringing on their patient rights. An example of this would be a Politico piece reported back on March 3rd, where they decry Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis for leading a medical freedom movement based on his opposition to lockdowns and vaccine and mask mandates, and they worry that it's catching fire in red regions of the country. The medical freedom movement is embracing the pureblood concept, which emphasizes that medical freedom still exists in our country. As one group puts it, with freedom comes the need for medical service options, where a choice or lack thereof may affect the outcome of life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness. As the World Council of Health puts it, informed consent exists to protect people from coercion, medical experimentation, and procedures that may cause them more harm than benefit. Since you are the one that has to live with the consequences of any medicine or procedure, you should be given the information to make an informed, free choice. The movement is calling for the transformation of the current legislation protecting patients. They focus attention on the need of medical freedom and point out the difficulties that patients and doctors face when a designated donor request is made. Although designated blood donations have existed for some time, the main issue raised by the medical freedom movement is that most patients are denied this basic right at the point of service. However, it should be pointed out that there are several legal instruments already in place to protect patients' right to choose treatment. For example, If requested, a patient's doctor writes an order for directed blood donation, which is a safe and legal process in the medical community. A patient also receives protection from the 14th Amendment of the Constitution that protects their life, property, and liberty, none of which can be taken away without due legal process. Furthermore, the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom provides protection for the patient's freedom of thought, belief, religion, and conscience. And lastly, the Patient's Determination Act of 1990 provides credibility to the medical freedom movement's call for legislation in support of a patient's right to a designated donor. Essentially, the act was designed to help the patient make decisions regarding the medical care that they receive. Meanwhile, the medical freedom movement is growing in its influence with recent victories in local elections. Groups such as the Health Freedom Movement are pushing the agenda in school board and sheriff races. Despite the movement's growing influence, however, some doctors and hospitals are pushing back. For example, the Wisconsin Medical Society has been one of many establishment opposers of the medical freedom bills, but underlining that they threaten basic safeguards of care. And of course, we have the World Health Organization, which has on several occasions reiterated that the risk of transmission of COVID-19 through blood donations is unlikely. And the issue is not only restricted to here in the United States. The trend of patients refusing blood from COVID-19 vaccinated donors are becoming much more common in Canada as well. Timothy Caulfield, a professor at the University of Alberta, believes that the current situation is driven by misinformation, which leads to wrongful conclusions about the safety of the transfusions. Additionally, critics of this medical freedom movement will also say that there is no indication that directed blood donations leads to safer donations when compared to voluntary donors, as they have to meet the same eligibility criteria. Meanwhile, the medical freedom movement has also seen the involvement of courts and government agencies in the directed blood donation issue. Back in November of 2022, for example, there was a court case in New Zealand where parents had refused their child to be operated on unless they could be assured that he would receive blood from an unvaccinated donor. The father was quoted as saying that we don't want blood that is tainted by vaccination. That's the end of the deal. We are fine with anything else these doctors want to do. In response, ignoring the parents' wishes, Dr. Mike Shepard, Auckland's interim director at the Health Service, filed papers in the Auckland's High Court. It asked that the baby's guardianship be moved from his parents and given to the hospital instead, so consent could be given to use donated blood, whether vaccinated or not. Dr. Shepard defended his actions by saying this: "The decision to make an application to the courts is always made with the best interest of the child in mind." And so the guardianship was passed to the doctors who performed the operation. These kind of actions have further fueled the fear and outrage of those who wish to retain bodily autonomy. Far too many professionals in the medical community have become dismissive of those seeking health freedom. And so the medical freedom activists are working tirelessly on legislation that will ensure that their patients' rights during transfusion are protected. Now, while it is true here in the United States it is entirely possible to get a directed transfusion in the present day, either under a doctor's signed order or the patient's will, legislation is viewed by most in the medical freedom camp as a crucial element in protecting these rights, as far too often requests for directed donors are overruled. The push for bills covering medical freedoms will most certainly characterize the next step in the struggle for patient power in making their own medical decisions. This is a fight that will be crucial for future generations in deciding just how free our societies will truly be. And that, my friends, will bring our episode to a close once more. For more content like this, be sure to check back to this channel daily, Monday through Friday, or for written content, feel free to visit us at trialsitenews.com, where news articles are uploaded every day, 7 days a week. And as ever always, my friends, thank you so much for joining me on the program today. From Trial Site News, I am Adrian, and I will see you all next time.